Okay, I'm terribly sorry for people who may have gotten notified a couple of times. I was trying to respond to a question from a viewer, and the question is pretty long. Um, there's one part of it, which I listed in the title, which says, what happens if we stop feeling the touch of the breath while doing Anapana, which is the breath, attention to breath? And there are many other layers to the question. And so I'm going to try to summarize as well as give a little context on the question. So first off, what is the touch of the breath? So in the Goenka retreat, remember there's 3 days initially of Anapana. On the first couple of days, you're asked, or the first 3 days, you're just asked to pay attention to your breath, to noticing your in breath and out breath. Um, you start off noticing in a large area, noticing your breath, large. Uh, I put that in quotes because in many traditions you're paying attention to your belly or your chest, but in Vipassana you're starting out just by noticing breath in this area. And then you slowly narrow that focus over the first 3 days and get right to the edge of the nostrils, eventually to the sensation associated with the breath rushing or brushing past your upper lip, either on the in breath or on the out breath. Um, and oftentimes, at least for me, it does take a couple of days to get to that level of concentration. So the question was, this is from someone who's been to multiple retreats as a longtime student. And the question was, I normally feel that, and I stopped feeling that. And what do I do? And there's more nuances to how that happened, and I'll kind of separate that out. So first off, as I answer this, I'll say, as always, I'm not an assistant teacher. I'm not qualified to teach Vipassana. I do teach secular meditation. I'm also a practitioner of Vipassana for about 10 or so years. I've been to multiple retreats. I try to go every few years. And I have been practicing the daily 2 hours on weekdays for about 2 years, and daily hour for about 10 years. So I just want to mention that for context, um, not to toot a horn about that. So, okay, caveats being that I'm not a teacher, but I'll try to respond. Um, so my personal experience, the viewer said that they actually, prior to this one particular retreat, when this happened, they were able to notice the touch of the breath almost at any time while practicing Anapana. And that's, to me, that sounds amazing and really great, that they were able to get that level of concentration. My experience is that I often, because of the distractions in daily life, my sensitivity is not that sharp. And when I'm practicing in daily life, I'm usually able to pay attention to the breath on the tips of my nostrils, on the edges of my nostrils, but not quite at the upper lip, unless I'm doing like a half day retreat. Um, before I directly answer the question, I want to say one thing. My experience on the second, third, fourth retreat that I went to, and it took me a while to learn this, um, was that every time I went and I sat down and I started doing, following the practices, my experience was, oh man, I've been doing it wrong for the last 3 years. I have little kids, so it takes me a couple of years before I can set the conditions right at home to be able to go on a retreat. And so every time I'd be like, man, I've been doing it wrong for the last 2 years or 3 years. And I would spend the first few days berating myself and being like, okay, well, now I'm going to get it right. And then after several times of that happening, I realized that either I'm getting it wrong every time and I'm a very slow learner, or the way that I think about it now is that it's like peeling the layers of an onion. And that every time I go to Vipassana, I'm experiencing things at a different level. And then, sometimes I lose that level, or sometimes, I peel back another layer when I go to Vipassana. And the experience of sort of the newness of the practice is always there because there's always um, a new level of depth of experiencing the practice. So I say that because there's something about having expectations, and we know this in theory from Vipassana, is not to have expectations and to experience the practice as it unfolds. Um, but at the same time, it's really hard to incorporate that into the practice. For example, uh, if you expect, oh, when I start, I'm going to feel some sensation at the top of my head because I'm not a beginner anymore. I've been doing this for a while. But then as soon as you go in with that expectation, and 99% of the time that happens, and sometimes when it doesn't happen, it can really throw us off. So I share that to say that um, that I don't experience the touch of the breath immediately. And for me, that's okay. I experience the attention to the breath, and I think about it as like, what's the point of doing Anapana? Well, one is it gives you an anchor of something to come back to when when sensations and thoughts are difficult or intense. Coming to the breath is a simple practice. But it's not just that it's a simple practice. It's not like, you know, I'm bored and I need something to do. Uh, it is, yes, a simple practice, but it's also a practice that's training this skill set of coming back, of sort of sharpening our attention. So, I think the summary from that for the viewer, Tina, who mentioned that they were going through this shift where they had been able to experience the touch of the breath on all prior retreats on during home practice, but then after a particular incident on the retreat, they stopped being able to feel it. So the summary for that, I would say, is one, I personally don't think it's a bad thing, uh, sort of bad necessarily in terms of your practice, to not be able to experience that. And then two, if you can, see if you can just let go of that expectation, because and that's hard because you've always experienced that, but see if you can let go of that expectation of feeling the touch of the breath and just see what it's like to pay attention to the breath almost fresh. Um, Let me add one more thing to that. So, especially when it comes to noticing sensations, my experience has been, with sensations in general, not just the touch of the breath, but sensations in general, is that when we either go in with an expectation, uh, or a trepidation or like a fear, like, am I going to feel something? And I've never been able to feel, something here. So as I'm going there, I'm almost going in expecting I'm not going to be able to feel something here. Whenever I do that, it's almost like that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So having this fear or this expectation or trepidation of either experiencing the breath or not experiencing the breath here might also be sort of creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the summary there is to really let go of that particular piece. I want to go back to some of the so that sort of answers the crux. It's not really the crux in my opinion, but sort of the surface level of the question, which is, what do I do if I don't experience the touch of the breath? Am I doing anapana wrong? And I would say, no, I don't think you're doing anapana wrong. Anapana is just about training your attention using a particular object of attention. And the goal of making that object of attention smaller and finer and more subtle is that it's sharpening your attention further and further. Just like when you sharpen a knife, you might start with a coarse sharpening, or like a sandpaper, you might start with coarse sandpaper, and then you go finer and finer to give those finishing touches. So similarly, that's what you're doing. And you are where you are. Getting, worrying about why you're not able to experience something doesn't do anything for that moment. So that's my attempt at trying to make you feel better about where you are. Okay, second, uh, the the particular incidents um, leading up to that event. So viewer shared in a comment that they got to Vipassana a day late. I'm going to try to summarize, and I hope I get this. I hope I get this right. Um, they showed up to Vipassana a day late because of some unforeseen circumstances. And so the instructor, the assistant teacher, asked them to still follow the same routine of starting with just attention to breath and working up over 3 days down to um, down to sensations around the breath. Now, um, and the problem happened because the viewer was paying attention to the sensation of breath, and the assistant teacher suggested that maybe they should just pay attention not to this, but just to the breath flowing versus the sensations associated with the breath. And that's such a subtle distinction. And I'm sorry that your experience was one where it felt conflicting and confusing, and it didn't feel like it came in a helpful way. When I read the comment and I read the situation, I really read it uh, as the teacher wanting you to have the appropriate ramp up time and really kind of working your way up to sensations. And the reason, again, my rationale for that is that when we do Anapana, it's a practice of kind of refining your attention slowly. And each time we do that on retreat, it's like in our daily lives, we don't get those 30 hours of silent retreat, uh, 30 hours being, the 3 10-hour days where you're really refining your attention. And when you do that, when you sharpen your knife like that, man, it cuts deep when you start going into noticing sensations after that. So my when I read your comment about what had transpired, I saw it as having a reasonable rationale, and yet I could just feel in the way that you described it so much difficulty of how that landed. Um, you know, when we practice, we have this aspiration that we extend the practice into our daily lives. Um, And so, we practice on the cushion, we practice to be equanimous, we practice to just observe reality as it is, and then we try to extend that into our lives. As things are happening and we notice emotions, equanimity, as well as noticing the reality as it exists, not as we would like it to be. And I found that sometimes it's difficult to bring that back to the practice. And as a very concrete example, I'll say this: for some reason, when I sit with people, Uh, if I'm, let's say, in an office environment, and I have to sit on a chair, I can sit 5 minutes, I can sit 10 minutes, but it just doesn't feel right to me. And so sometimes if I'm sitting on a chair, I'll still just, if it's appropriate, I'll pull my feet up and cross my legs, just because that's a habit I've built up of how to sit. Um, and I always wonder, like, one day if I have a leg injury or a lower back injury and I'm not able to sit in that particular posture, that's become such a habit to me of the way that I sit that suddenly it feels like, oh, I'm not doing the practice right. And this is not about the sitting posture, but it's just using that as an example to say that we often, because we're human, we build these habits around our practice itself that kind of give us these expectations, these particular things that we follow. And one of the hardest things when doing the practice is to remember some of these basic practice pieces of, well, this is how it is right now, and there's things I can change and there's things I can't, and can I bring that you know from my practice into life and from life back into the practice. So in this case, another concrete example, like the last couple of months I've been working on launching a startup, and I'm in the midst of it all, and life is so busy. And oftentimes I find, that I've spent a good amount of my hour just thinking about ideas and how I'm going to solve this bug, and what are my next steps, and so on. And then of course there's kids and family and all of these things. And suddenly my practice doesn't feel like I'm doing it right. Like, man, I'm just wasting time. And I keep coming back to the breath, or I keep coming back to the sensations, but most of the time I'm just lost in these thoughts. And remember that year when I was just practicing deeply. So I'm kind of narrating the thoughts that are in my head. And I often have to remind myself, like, no, this is the practice. When life is happening, when you're busy with the outside world and engagements, can you trust that in this moment the practice is about sharpening, the practice is about the equanimity, and so on. Um, and so this is got a lot longer than I intended, and hopefully I will edit this video down a little bit. Um, but coming back to the viewer's question about what if I just can't feel the touch of the breath while I'm practicing, and am I even doing the practice correctly now? And if I'm not able to feel this, like how do I move beyond this? And what I would say is to kind of let go of some of those expectations you have of um, and I'm paraphrasing or I'm kind of yeah paraphrasing here. You may not experience this, but sometimes there's a narrative in my head of like, well, I've been practicing for 10 years, so I should be good at this, or uh, for so long I've been practicing in this way, and so like how come I haven't made progress? Or narratives like that that often come up as just these questions. And so I think if you can really let go of the story around that and just come back to the basics. And what are the basics? Start by coming to the breath. Just use the breath. Don't worry about the details, but use the breath as a way to anchor yourself. Use the breath as a way to sort of do push-ups for your attention. Once you feel you have some stability of mind, if you're able to, use your attention to notice body sensations at different parts of your body. Whenever you're unable to do that with equanimity, use the breath as an anchor. Otherwise, keep going through the body sensations. As you're going through the body sensations, your goal is twofold. One, not to resist the urge to push away the unpleasant and to overly enjoy and get attached to the pleasant sensations. To have equanimity regardless of the sensations that and to observe the reality of that particular sensation in that particular time as it is, not as you expect it to be, not as you want it to be, not as you remember it being last time, but just as it is right now. And I think if you can have trust in that sort of that axiomatic piece of the practice, then I feel and I hope this happens for you that slowly um, the whatever that block is that is preventing you from being able to really notice those sensations, that will automatically loosen up. But if you try to loosen it up, the paradox, right? If you try to loosen it up and say, oh, I just want to feel that sensation, then it's not going to happen. But as soon as you're able to let go of that and just observe what's happening, whatever is happening, uh, it's been my experience that it might take some time, but that's sort of the path to get there. So that was a lot of talking. I hope it was helpful. Um, Please let me know if it was of service, and I hope I didn't say something harmful or mistaken in trying to respond to your question. Thanks.